message would be to the women and girls who feel like we're left with two white men to decide between?
I know. One of the hardest parts of this is all those baby promises and all those little girls who are going to have to wait 4 more years. That's going to be hard.
Jonathan Gilliam back in on The Experts. And let me tell you something, folks. We have a lot to talk about, probably too much to talk about, but it all kind of goes together, I guess. So, I'm going to have Dr. Lucarini on here in just a little bit, and I'm going to talk to, and I'm talking to them for sure, about this QAnon thing. And those of you who don't know about it, I'll explain, I guess I'll try to explain exactly what it is, but that's going to be here in just a little bit. What I want to talk about first is that soundbite that I played at the beginning of the show. I'm going to see if I can find that again, and the ridiculousness of that soundbite, because it shows folks that these people that are running for office, that they literally believe that they are, a godsend, that the world is broken if they don't stand out. And let me pull this back up and I'll show you. I'll play the soundbite again of Elizabeth Warren, once it loads. There's people who love Elizabeth Warren, and they love each one of these candidates. And most of the times they just don't look at who these people are. And narcissism is rampant among these people. And I think when the election process was happening, when Donald Trump was getting elected, and one of the CNN analysts, I cannot remember his name at this point in time. I tried to look up the video, but I just don't have it. He was saying that, what is his daughter? This is when Hillary Clinton lost. What is my daughter supposed to do? How is she going to know that she can be a doctor or that she can grow up and be an attorney if there's nobody before her, no females before her that have done these things in her time that she could see? It was the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because if you raise your children right, they're going to grow up with the confidence to know that they can be whatever they want to be, right? I didn't have anybody in my family who ever went to college. I went to college. I paid my own way through. I didn't even fathom getting a scholarship or huge loans. I worked 3 jobs. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I did what I had to do to get an education, and I truly went there to learn. But I didn't wait for somebody to come and inspire me. I mean, there's been people who inspired me along the way, but overall, I'm sure the same is with the rest of you. You decided you want to do something, and you do it. I know black people, black guys that I went to, and if anybody knows me, knows that I'm not comfortable with talking about somebody's color of their skin, because I think it's ridiculous and stupid. I really do. But there was several people who had dark skin or would call themselves black, Asians, small little guys that went through I'm talking about SEAL training here, little guys, big guys. The funny thing is, the majority of people that you would see show up that you think are going to just obviously make it through, they don't. The big muscled up guys, they don't make it through. It's the people that are self-motivators that have the vision to make it through. Those are the guys who make it through SEAL training. Let's see if this is, and I'll explain what I mean by all this.
I say this with a deep sense of gratitude for every single person who got in this fight, every single person who tried on a new idea, every single person who just moved a little.
Now, remember, you're listening to a woman who lied about being an Indian so she could have a job for $500,000 a year. Most of the stuff that she talked about during her campaign is she had no plan in showing how she's going to do it. Just simply, she likes to say things to get people spun up so that they will say, yes, she's got the right idea. Well, an idea without a plan to do it is it's nothing. It's make believe is what it is. And that's the case with the majority of these people. Trump's the only president in my lifetime who has done the majority of things that he said he was going to do. And the things that he hasn't done, it was simply because it's been held up through politics of the nonsense in Washington, D.C. Let's go back.
Their notion of what a president of the United States should look like. I will not be running for president in 2020, but I guarantee I will stay in the fight for the hardworking folks across this country who've gotten the short end of the stick over and over. That's been the fight of my life, and it will continue to be so.
What guidance would you give to your supporters who don't know who to support now?
Well, let's take a deep breath and spend a little time on that. We don't have to decide that this minute.
And I wonder what your message would be to the women and girls who feel like we're left with two white men to decide between.
I know.
And these stupid questions. What kind of stupid question is that? I mean, it's a racial statement. It's really racist, to tell you the truth. They think that because there's two white men that are left to run, that is a slap in the face of anybody who is black or who's a female. Look, I can guarantee you this in this country, if you show up and you have the background and that you didn't lie to make believe like she did or Joe Biden did or many of the other candidates that were running for president against Donald Trump, majority of those people have really pumped up their resume to make them look like they did something that they didn't. Right? That's very common in Washington, D.C. If somebody showed up and said, this is my resume, look at my resume, these are my ideas, here's how we'll solve it. And they had a charismatic personality that didn't take crap from people and stood up there and were well-versed. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, black or white. The fact is, the only reason Joe Biden's up there anyway, we all know it, is because the Democrat Party thinks he's electable, or the only one that is electable up next to President Trump. And Elizabeth Warren got her feelings hurt because her party and the powers that be in that party don't believe that she's electable against Donald Trump when she's not, because, well, in part because she's a liar.
One of the hardest parts of this is all those baby promises and all those little girls who are going to have to wait 4 more years.
Self-important. Self-important.
Will you be making an endorsement today? We know that you spoke with both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders yesterday.
Not today. Not today. I need some space around this, and want to take a little time to think a little more.
Because she wants somebody to offer her the vice presidency. That's why she wants to take time out and think.
I'm spending a lot of time right now on the question of suspending and also making sure that this works as best we can for our staff, for our team, for our...
Now, one thing I got to point out real quick, you hear the clicking of that shutter? Almost every camera you have nowadays, even these big professional ones, you can shut that off. That's a sound now because it's a digital camera. There's very few cameras have that clicking sound in them. That is the most annoying thing ever, that these guys have to have that. And it's like they're standing on a microphone somewhere.
Our volunteers.
So
Senator White,
I'm sorry?
It could be coming, but just not right now.
Not right now.
Senator White.
I know that your campaign manager, Roger Lau, said on the staff call today that he had no regrets. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, I do. I have no regrets at all. This has been the honor of a lifetime. 10 years ago, I was teaching a few blocks from here.
That's what I think about those. That's what I think about her run for the presidency. Oh, gosh. So anyway, I don't feel bad for her. And the thing I was talking about on CNN, I think I alluded to that. There was a CNN, and I cannot remember what the guy's name was. But he's black, and he was so upset about his daughter not having somebody to look up to. It's the same thing here. It's this self-centered self-importance. They just think that they are just the end-all be-all, because these people have so many ass-kissers around them. And they're so criminally and narcissistically minded that they believe that they are somebody. They believe that they have the ability to really... that this is the thing, that they are, in their minds, the vision that they've created for them to put out there, the persona that they want to project. And everybody, to some extent, look at social media. Everybody extends some type of persona. I mean, you go on social media, how many people do you see that look like they're living this unbelievable life, like they're jet setting here and there? And then if you knew them, you'd see that their lives, that they're miserable people. Either that was one vacation, they took multiple pictures and they keep putting it up, or even better, you know, with this high angle, taking pictures with your camera, giving a sense of your raw beauty. What people do is they search around for the right angle, and once they get that angle, then all the pictures are from that angle, because that's not real. I mean, look, I'm not condemning people for not having model-esque type of beauty, but be yourself. You're going to find somebody who's like you if you are yourself. But it's the same thing here, you know. If Elizabeth Warren showed her true self, people would be appalled. There'd be no way that she would ever get elected for anything. The majority of these people are the same way. That's why politics are ran by extremists that are either ideologues or they are just absolute fake people. And it's just like any other job. That's who they are. They're just fake people. You know, social media, same thing. I'm going to play this tape real quick. A friend of mine just sent this a little while ago. Now, I'm going to play this for you, and then I'm going to explain why it got blocked on Facebook, which I think is ridiculous, okay? Let's see here. Let me rewind it. Here it goes. By the way, this is Joe Biden, and he's got Beto O'Rourke sitting with him and somebody else in a diner, so it's kind of loud, but they both just look ridiculous.
This guy can change the face of what we're dealing with regard to guns, assault weapons, regard to...
So he basically said this guy has changed the way we look at things in regards to climate change and assault weapons.
Dealing with climate change. And I just warning Amy, if I win, I'm coming for it.
And he says, I know it's loud, he says, and if I win, this is Joe Biden talking, he says, if I win, I'm coming for you. Now, a friend of mine posted on Facebook saying that they originally said that Joe Biden said that he's going to be coming after guns. And it came back from Facebook saying that partly false information, it's been checked by experts or by independent fact checkers, and it's not true. It's partially true. So, and then it gives you the question whether you want to share it or not, which means it's not going to go anywhere, right? But the reality is it's absolutely true. It's just that the way that I guess they worded the post was that they said Joe Biden's coming after guns. Well, Joe Biden said, this guy's changed it. And if I get elected, I'm coming after you. So that he can go out and he said that on stage, that he's going to have Beto O'Rourke help him go after the assault weapons. And Beto O'Rourke's called for a full turnover of your weapons. You see, when we look at all of these, at the totality of the circumstances, I always say this: totality of the evidence, totality of the circumstances. When you look at these things, that these people, the nonsense that they spew, what you get out of that, if you look at the totality of it, is you get a picture of things that cannot be, or that are just outright liars or lies. And people often ask me, you know, where do you do your research? Well, one of the ways I do research is I listen to what these people say. I take their sound bites, and then I go get in touch with somebody. I know somebody who's a simple day trader, somebody who's a stockbroker, and I ask them, is it feasibly possible, or an accountant, you talk about taxes, is it feasibly possible to collect this amount of taxes to pay for all these different things at this level, when more and more people are going to be going on welfare and getting less and less and giving less and less money into the tax bowl? I mean, that's how you take what they're saying, go ask somebody who knows about it. In the case of Beto O'Rourke, you know, I look at the Second Amendment, which the founding fathers wrote, and everything that he says is lockstep and barrel with a communist regime. Because I know the Second Amendment. That's the other thing. All these people say they're patriots. You ever read the Constitution? Do you know the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? Do you? You should. because it's very short. It's not like I'm asking you to read Obamacare. It's very short. Go read it. It's some of the language is a little difficult because it's in lawyer speak, not because it's old, because they were all attorneys or government, minded type of people. They were law-minded people. So it's not the hardest thing in the world to read. But obviously, if you read it and then you listen to what these people say, it goes against everything that is written in the Constitution. Because they're liars. It's not hard to figure it out. Okay, I guess President Trump, and this goes right along with that, President Trump just got off of a town hall on Fox News. And out of all the things that were said there, a couple things stood out. One is that Fox News actually let him on there because they've been given legitimacy to the left, and they're saying they're fair and balanced. But that's like saying that we're going to interview a heart surgeon and we're going to interview a serial killer that's cut somebody's heart out. We're going to give them equal, or let's say there's a medical student who's trained in medicine but hasn't done an operation on the heart yet, but they've studied everything, right? And then there's a serial killer who's actually cut a heart out. And so they give equal representation because it's fair and balanced to somebody who's actually touched a heart or actually opened a chest. They don't mention the fact that he's a serial killer. That's exactly what's happening when it comes to the way they legitimize the Democrat Party. Fox News is one of the mainstream media outlets that's responsible for legitimizing these weirdos on the left. Remember, if you're liberal and you're listening to this, you got to stop equating yourself with these people, because I don't equate you with them. I have friends who are liberal. And I have a hard time believing sometimes that they can actually follow what these people say, because I know they're good people with good hearts. They're not narcissists. They just take things at face value because they consider themselves a Democrat. And if you are a liberal, you need to look at the reality of what you actually are, not just saying I'm liberal. Look at what you believe. Look at the problems in the world and ask yourself, are those solvable? Are those solvable by an ideology, or are there legitimate ways to solve that? And then present those. And if it's impossible, it's impossible. But people don't question these individuals. They don't question them. When I'm listening to President Trump in this town hall, what I'm seeing is somebody who has thought through the problems and who is thinking through future problems. One kid gets up there and he talks about North Korea, and he's asking him, everybody's worried about North Korea. I can't remember exactly what he said, but Trump answers that question in a very, very interesting way. And I if you haven't watched it, I think you might be able to get it online on YouTube. You should go watch it, because the way he answers the questions is from a perspective of somebody who has thought their way through problems. And I think that's very, very important to have in a world leader. When you look at these other individuals, Joe Biden, for instance, Joe Biden doesn't even know what he's running for. He doesn't know the difference between his sister and his wife. He doesn't know the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. I played that soundbite for you at the beginning of the show yesterday from Joe Biden. It was horrendous. I agree wholeheartedly with him, and I say this stuff all the time, but it shows you again that he is in touch with the way that you feel, which these people are not. Listen, you may be listening, you may have dark skin, you may be a woman, you may be gay, you may be straight, you may be white, Asian, I don't know. But when these politicians speak, there's certain key words that they can say that they know you're going to agree with, or they know that they can kind of push on this, like, you're oppressed this way, or you're oppressed that way, even though you may not have been oppressed. You may know somebody who has, or whatever, and they know with certain groups you can say certain things. And so they key in on those, and they use those to keep people divided. When you listen to Trump talk, it's like listening to yourself, right? And it's not about division. It's like, this is wrong. You should fix this stuff. Here he is on Sean Hannity's radio or TV show.
Well, look, I don't want to be too critical. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. And I'm sure that the Democrats are saying the same thing, but they'd rather have him than Bernie. And Bernie doesn't make too many gaffes, but Bernie's got his own difficulties. But the way they push, and look, the media is all on their side. When I say all but a little bit, including yourselves and some of the folks on Fox, some of the folks around. You have some great people. You have Rush, who's doing, I hear, really well. I hear he's doing much better. And Mark Levin. And, we have a lot of support. You'd be amazed. We have a lot of support. The great Lou Dobbs. So many people we have as supporters outside of just, our Fox News, which, I have my own little difficulties with, if you want to know the truth. They put people on that I think are inappropriate and say very, very false things, and people don't challenge them. I think they're trying to be very politically correct, or fair and balanced, right, is the term, fair and balanced. But
I think he's absolutely right in all that stuff. And why? Because he is somebody who is down to earth in the extent that he can be down to earth, and somebody who thinks his way through the problems. And he has a realistic view of reality. I mean, it's clear that that's the case. Now, let's look at some other things that are going on, as far as like the coronavirus. And when the president speaks about that stuff, it's the same way. And I'm going to have Dr. Lucarini on here just shortly to talk about that, about the coronavirus and the updates. But I mean, you look at the way other people are reacting about this, and you look at the calm, cool, and collective way that he's reacting and putting the experts in charge. People are saying, this is where the Democrats, it cracks me up. Well, he put Mike Pence. Shouldn't he put a doctor in charge? Well, the reality is the person in charge, right? If you really want to be a great manager, you have to be somebody who can manage great people. And sometimes it's not taking people who are the most knowledgeable in a field, an area, and putting them in charge is not the best idea, because they may not have good managerial skills. They may be experts in their field, just experts, right? So you take somebody who can manage the experts and who can task organize and who can take their information and with other experts chart this stuff and figure out which way we should go as a group. That's the way a true leader works, regardless if you're just as knowledgeable or not. And I think Mike Pence is fully capable of that. He's the vice president of the United States, for goodness sakes. I think it's a great thing because he's going to be reporting to the president. But you look at other countries, and it's a lot of stuff is happening right now. And in Singapore, for instance, if you lie about where you've been, you can get 6 months in jail for that in Singapore. Of course, in Singapore, they cane you there too for kissing in public or chewing gum. South Korea tests hundreds of thousands of people, which I'm wondering where they're getting these test kits, because these test kits are very in low numbers right now. The mortgage rate. Here's an interesting thing that I was looking at. These mortgage rates and overall the way that the Fed works, the way that the banks work and the bankers is that in the stock market is that they are reactive. If they see something's happening, the stock market just reacts. The Fed reacts. And what I'm starting to see now when I'm looking at headlines about the Fed, and they're going to be lowering interest rates, or mortgage rates, I believe is what it is, and interest rates, I believe too. I'm not an expert in economics, but I'd read one article and it's talking about how they are reactive. I do need to, and I'm going to try to get somebody, a financial person, to come on here and talk about this, because they are reactive. The whole thing is reactive. And what's crazy is they have not planned for this. Same thing with the majority of the federal government. They have not planned for this. And that is a big problem, as I've talked about before, is that you have to be prepared. You can't just wing it. It doesn't work like that. Let's see here. What else? In Saudi Arabia, they're emptying their holiest sites. In Bethlehem, it's quarantined. Southwest CEO warns that plunging domestic travel is the same. It feels the same after like it did after 9/11. Oh yeah, here it is. Interest rates head towards zero, right? Most of this stuff is occurring because the people that you rely on to make sure that everything's taken care of have not taken care of everything. They are not forward thinking this stuff. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. But why don't I tell you what, let's take a break real quick. And I'm going to bring on Dr. Michael Lucarini so we can get some real answers for this. Let's take a break and we're going to come back with the doctor. You know, I've talked to you all over and over again about my book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. What many of you may not realize is that it has 2 workbooks that go with it. Now, real quick, for those of you that already have the book and those of you that are going to get the book, this is what it's all about. Half of the book is about looking at yourself from the attacker's point of view, and the other half is about learning to use that information that you gain from looking at yourself from the attacker's point of view to build better defenses. The book shows you in the first half how to divide your life into sectors and do surveillance on yourself, your home, your business, your church, your school. And the second half takes that information, shows you how to take it, and then build the proper awareness, mitigation strategies, how to get rid of those vulnerabilities, and have a plan of action where you can't change anything. The Threat Assessment Workbook, which is workbook number 1 under the same name, Sheep No More, is a book where you can take that understanding that you get through the original book, which you have to read first, and then actually put pen to paper, shoe to ground, and go out there and collect this information and build the threat assessment from the attacker's point of view. After that, what do you get? Workbook number 2, the Defense Assessment Workbook, so you can take that information from 1 and incorporate it into number 2 and build those defenses. What does this give you? I'll tell you what it gives you. Awareness and a proper defense for anything that's important for you. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and workbook number 1, the Threat Assessment Workbook, and workbook number 2, the Defense Assessment Workbook. Go get them. If this gets any worse, you're going to have plenty of time to sit at home and read it. Do it wherever books are sold. All right. Now I think we'll bring in my good buddy, Dr. Lucarini. I really don't have a song for him, but let me see what I have here. I think I have a good one for him. Let's see here. Yeah, that'll be a good one. Here you go. Stay steady rocking. Oh yeah. Keep it going clocking. Mm-hmm. I stay steady rocking. I think this is good coronavirus music, I think. All right, here he comes. You always got to string it along there to make it a big entrance. Dr. Michael Lucarini, live on The Experts. What do you got, Doctor? Is there anything new?
Yes, there is. Jonathan, thanks for having me back on the Experts podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you. 2 things. First, I think that it's significant that the mortality rate in the United States has taken a huge jump upward. We're now at about 6%, and that has climbed dramatically within the last 48 hours. If you look at the number of cases identified as about 220 cases, we now have 12 deaths in the United States. So that's a big jump for us. I think it's of concern that it's going up so quickly. I suspect, Jonathan, that it is the consequence of our doing a far more effective job in comparison to other countries of isolating, identifying where this virus is appearing, and also something we really haven't talked about before. You know, people do die every day, those who are over 50 and 60 with underlying conditions, but not everyone is tested for coronavirus. We're starting to realize that older man, older woman who is in a nursing home, Of course, there were a number of such patients up in Washington that died as a result of coronavirus exposure. But even in locations just as Arizona and other places, we're going to start looking for those that seem to have simply passed away, but perhaps had a few symptoms of coronavirus, and now they test positive post-mortem for it. I think we're going to find that there are more and more people who have had coronavirus and it was involved in their death.
Interesting. Yeah, and especially children, because as we've said, they're virtually showing little signs of it. But there's no tests. I mean, here's the thing. Are we not in this country? I don't know about the rest of the world. It seems like South Korea is testing like crazy, but what's the deal with the tests? How are they saying that they know this person has coronavirus when there's just very little test out there?
The CDC is controlling the test kits, and they're controlling them because essentially there are very few of them in production. The sensitivity and specificity is not as high as the CDC would like to have them. So there are too many patients with the current kits that we have in the United States that could actually be tested positive and not have the disease, which is one very bad aspect of testing. And of course, the even worse aspect of those that are testing negative but actually do have the disease going back into the community. So the test kits, unfortunately, sensitivity and specificity isn't as high as we'd like. So the process, at least here in Arizona, is that if I suspect a person does have symptoms of coronavirus, I am to send them to the local level 3 medical center, which would be the University Hospital downtown Phoenix. The emergency room physicians and their paraprofessionals, the extended care providers, would assess the patient and determine whether or not they meet criteria for testing, notify the CDC. The CDC will send a half a dozen of the kits out if they're not already in the emergency department, and testing would be performed. So it could be 24 hours before a person arrives at a care center and gets tested. We have very poor point-of-care testing here in the States, which makes it extremely difficult, in my opinion, to control the spread of this virus.
Yes, and then we have idiots like Mayor Cuomo here in New York City that goes on television and tells people that if they are quarantined, that they're going to be policed and they will not be able to leave. Now, okay, can they do that? Absolutely. We're looking up the laws in this country, and that actually can happen. But why would you say that? Because what's going to happen now, people aren't going to go to the hospital because they don't want to be quarantined. They don't want to be, what's it called, where you're forced to be to sit in your home by the police.
Yep, absolutely. You've been placed under house arrest for a medical condition, and that's the difference between having health care administered by physicians and providers and nurses as opposed to your government bureaucrat. And there's a very clear parallel of why government-centric, socialized healthcare, Jonathan, is very undesirable, because they get to tell you everything, and they're not really that compassionate. They come across compassionate when they do a presser, but they're truly not compassionate for the individual when it comes down to giving them liberty and freedom. Now, if they really do have symptoms, clearly we want them to be quarantine, but there's a way to do it and a way to say it. You don't mandate it, and you certainly don't use the law to make sure that people's control is taken away from them.
Right. I thought it was a stupid thing for him to come on and say, but he's kind of a stupid person. So, but you know what? You know what sucks is I tweeted that out, and this is what I hate about Twitter, and I love the iPhones, but this is one of the things I hate about them, is that the spell check is dumber than I am, and I'm a terrible speller. So here I am calling Cuomo an idiot for doing that. And a buffoon, and I spelt mandatory wrong because it left one of the letters out.
Okay. Well, listen, we can forgive you for that because we know you don't have coronavirus and it didn't affect the way you spell. So that's all right. Sure, we'll let it go.
Sure. So let's see. Here's what were the other things? Now, with medicine, I think we talked about this before. Now it's funny because we're like a day ahead of the things that they're saying, because now they're starting to say, that there's going to be a run on medicine. And that we should, and in this show, I've talked about how important it is for the United States to realize, which I've been screaming for a long time, that they need to become more self-sufficient in the importance of borders and immigration and all these things. This is actually showing every bit of it, why it's all important. But when it comes to the medication, I don't think most people realize that we just don't manufacture most of the medicines here.
80% of the medications that come into our nation, specifically the generic forms, comes from the supply chain in China. So when we look at it purely from an economic point of view, let alone a healthcare point of view, we know that for years in the future, we're going to have some difficulty, Jonathan, getting those medicines into us, at least for the next year, because China's economy has crashed from the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the United States, pharmaceutical industry tells us they have between 1 to 2 years of reserve supply of the medicines that come from China should China actually stop exporting those meds to us. So we do have some reserve. But today I had the opportunity to be on the American Agenda show with Bob Sellers on Newsmax, and I covered some of the important components in preparation for coronavirus. Look, I don't think we need a run on toilet paper. I don't think we need to go get water. The food sources in the United States are not going to be contaminated with coronavirus. But there are some basics, and medications, specifically generics to control hypertension, diabetes, the types of diseases that we take medicines for every single day. I think over the next year, it would be wise for us to buy an extra couple months here and there and put them away so that if that supply chain continues to break down and we see shortages, that we can then have them on hand.
But how are they supposed to do that with prescription medicines when they go to their doctor? How are they can their doctor prescribe them like double dose so they can have some at home? I mean, how's that work?
Yeah, it's not necessary to do that. Today, as individual patients, we're used to actually having the insurance companies pay for our medicine. So it's the insurance industries, companies that will put restrictions on the frequency that we can refill a medication.
Oh, it's not law.
Blue Cross. That's right. Blue Cross Blue Shield for example, doesn't want a person to fill a 90-day prescription and then go back 10 days later and fill another one. They don't want to pay for it. But there are great services out there. One of them is a service called GoodRx that many of my patients use that provide a deep discount if they want to pay cash for it. So if I give a patient a 3-month supply with 3 additional refills to cover them for a whole year for their blood pressure medicine, and they decide that the second refill, they're not going to wait 90 days, but want to do it 10 days later, they can walk in with a GoodRx discount card and say to the pharmacist, look, I want to activate one of the refills. We don't need to go through insurance. I'll pay cash for it right now, and they get a substantial discount. So, yeah, you can do it. Listen, my dad, God rest his soul, he passed away recently. I think you know that. He passed away. But I got his medications, by and large, in that manner. And without going through insurance, Jonathan, I actually saved him about $25 a month. And I always told him when he was with me, that was money he could take me out to dinner with. I think he owes me about 30 or 40 dinners, but that's okay. We'll settle up later.
Well, that's very interesting. And about the, I don't think most people realize this when it comes to medications. I don't think they think it's the law. Everything's the law, but a lot of times it's not the law. It's the insurance companies. Let me see. What else is there? So now in New York, here's an interesting thing I wanted to ask you about. So, I lived in New York for 15 years. I have a lot of good Jewish friends, and I've studied the Jewish community when I was in college, and I was studying religions, and I was going to major in religions and philosophy. Ended up majoring in political science and psychology. But I've always been fascinated by the closed religious community. So, So like the Christian community invites everybody in. Come in. We want you to know the Lord and come on in. But with the Jewish community, it's not like that. They're a closed community. They're not really interested in you coming over there and becoming Jewish. And I think in large part, same thing with the Muslim community. They're not out actively recruiting. They recruit more than the Jews do, but not actively all over the place. So by and large, the communities are closed. And how, because in New York, we're already starting to see that this attorney, which is interesting because every time they talk about him, they say the attorney who got it. Why not just saying the guy in Westchester County who got it? They always have to point out he was an attorney for some reason. But so he got it.
Well, many of us would consider attorneys as a virus anyway.
That's true.
I hope so. As a doctor, I guess I could say that. But they say the same about me.
As a human being, you can say that. So, but they're saying that he got it, his wife had it, and their kid has it, and his kid goes to a school that is kind of like where they go to that school, which is big in that community. He goes and stays at that school. So, I guess the question I'm having here is, could this be something? Yes, it's a virus like the flu or anything else going to have a certain amount of people that are going to die from it. But in a community like these closed communities, how rapidly do these types of viruses usually spread? Because I want to send not the alarm up, but the caution alarm up for all the people who listen to this show that are in one of these communities. It's kind of a closed community. How much more are they going to be affected than the general populace?
Jonathan, you have hit upon a very important point with this particular virus. We do know that it's highly contagious, and it is highly contagious for two reasons. The first is that the period of infectiousness for an individual who has the virus, is carrying and spreading it, is about 14 days, perhaps even a little bit longer. So those that meet together frequently have a much higher hit rate. In other words, the time in which they spend together can translate into a better likelihood, a higher likelihood that they're going to transmit to friends and family. Mm-hmm. That's the first aspect of the risk for these closed communities. And the second is that for those patients who are in a closed community, it usually is a community that is very attentive to the medical needs of others. In other words, some communities that don't spend time with one another, those that are ill tend to isolate themselves. There aren't too many people that come to help, to serve them, and to meet their needs. Well, in the Jewish community, and again, in the Christian communities, when someone is ill and they don't feel well, there is an overwhelming response, typically with people bringing food over, support, prayers, whatever it is. And they can bring into those that are already ill this coronavirus and make them deathly ill. So to send the warning up to these closed communities or these tight-knit communities is particularly important to say, you've got to make sure that every 1 to 2 hours, put an egg timer on the counter, and when that egg timer goes off in 1 to 2 hours, go and wash your hands, warm soapy water, 30 seconds. Once or twice a day, take every flat surface in the home and wipe it down with a disinfectant. And then, if you're in a position where you can actually keep that person who is at risk for exposure away from those crowds. Look, we have Skype, we have video conferencing, we can actually FaceTime. Those opportunities to interact without having face-to-face and leaving particles that are infectious in that home have to be utilized. So, yeah, those closed communities, there's not enough that's said specifically to them and directed for them to be able to help them to protect against such a spread.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we need to hear as far as the update goes. I guess the rest of this stuff is just sit and wait. And my big thing is going to the gym every night. You don't realize how germ infested it is in the gym until you go there, and you realize everybody's sweating. Everything you touch is going to have droplets of something on it. I go and sit on, they have this magical thing at Planet Fitness. It's like a water pressure bed. It's a water jet, and it shoots up, does like a massage, but with hot water.
Wow.
And you lay on it. It's amazing. Yeah. Well, when you get up off of it, you're sweating because it makes your back hot and it makes you sweat. And then I'm like sitting here looking at this going, oh, this is crazy.
Who's cleaning that? Who's cleaning that?
At Planet Fitness, they do have people who come around and clean, but they have spray bottles everywhere, and it's kind of like the protocol to wipe down the machines when you're done. But I don't really think it's spot rubbing is really what it is. It's not like you're thoroughly cleaning anything. So
yeah, there's some risk there. There's no question. And people, when they exercise, they're going to cough anyway, and if they're contagious, it's going to spread. So yeah, I think in those scenarios we have to be very careful, very selective of the times that you go to the gym. Some people, would go earlier or later where it won't be quite as crowded. You have to be quite careful with that. That's a great point.
Now, one of the things
here I am in a position where I want people to exercise, Jonathan, and I want them, still to not be exposed. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle for a recommendation there. Yeah.
Right. I have one other thing. Now, I said the other day on the show, and you disagreed with me on this, but if it gets worse, and we don't have the test kits, if somebody comes in with severe issues and there's not a test kit and they can't tell, and the person does not test positive for the flu, should they assume that the potential there is that they have this coronavirus and they should be quarantined? I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about when they come in the hospital and they're, they got it bad. They're feverish, they're coughing, and they do not test positive for the coronavirus, but they don't have they don't test positive for the flu, but they don't have the corona test.
Okay. When we say they're going to be quarantined, that means they are being given a directive, not by law. We don't put a police officer in front of their door, but we tell them, do not go out, do not associate with anybody else. In other words, you can't have anyone in the home. There's absolutely no egress from this area. That door is closed and you cannot come out. That's different from saying you need to isolate yourself with your family. If anybody else has symptoms, let us know. It's a different sense for that. The isolation is fine, but I don't think we're at the stage without quarantine, unless, Jonathan, the history in the last month, the person says, yep, I visited my grandma May up in a nursing home in King County in Washington State for 3 days.
But the problem with that is in Washington State and also in New York, they have cases where they weren't anywhere.
That's correct.
They just caught it.
You're bringing up a flaw in the system, and what I would tell you is there is a concern for that continued spread. I don't think we're at the threshold in the expansion of the disease process in the states that we want to simply say, as a healthcare provider, you have a viral illness. It's consistent with COVID-19. You do not have influenza B, which is the predominant influenza infection now. So I therefore would tell you, you need to quarantine yourself. Stay away from everybody. Put yourself in a hotel room or back in the back bedroom of your home for 14 days and have people deliver food to you. You cannot leave the house. We're not there yet, Jonathan. We may get there, and I don't really know what the criteria would be for me to switch and move over to your side. I am very concerned about it, but I still think I would use history as the predominant modality or predominant criteria to determine if someone needs to be quarantined.
All right. Oh, but also the hospitals should be, if they come in, they don't test positive for flu, but they got these symptoms, the hospitals themselves should be assuming that they had it, and they should be assuming that anybody that came in contact could possibly have gotten it.
Great point. When triage is done, a person walks in and they describe their symptoms right at the front within minutes of arrival. The staffs at all the hospitals are trained to bring them out of the general population in the waiting room and put them in isolation until they can further elucidate the symptoms and effect a plan of care. So they're doing a good job at that level. But you know what? One cough in the emergency room with an infected person, one cough is all it takes to really spread that virus. It doesn't take very much at all. So nothing is foolproof in the face of this disease.
Yeah. All right, brother. Thank you very much, and congratulations on being on Newsmax. Hopefully they'll start using you more, and you're always welcome on this show.
Jonathan, thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
You got it, my friend. Out. All right, so there you go, folks. Interesting, as always, talking to Dr. Michael Lucarini and getting his information, his take on this. We have a little disagreement there. I'm a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the quarantine stuff, but I do agree with him about it not being policed. I think people should have enough responsibility, but I guess it's really a take on who these people are and how much help they have. That's the other problem, is that some people may not have anybody at home to help them out if they're sick. That's a problem, and the hospital should be thinking about that as well as the community. If you're, rather than putting a cop out there to make sure somebody's quarantined, how about getting some people to say, okay, here's what you'll need, and the city could help in assisting get that stuff if they need it. I don't know. This is the way you think outside the box. But now let's take a break real quick. I got a couple commercials for you, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to talk about the Q stuff. It's not going to, listen. I've got to talk to these people. Next to the leftist on Twitter, they give me more grief than anybody else, and they just hate it when you have your own opinion about Q. So we'll come back and talk about that. We'll be right back. Check it out, folks. If you're looking for something to get away from Facebook, well, look no further. ConnectZing.com. ConnectZing.com. My good buddy Drago, who you heard about in episode number 2, who came from socialist Poland, came to the United States, became an American citizen legally, and then became a Navy SEAL for 20 years. He's decided, because he's a computer programmer, to create the Facebook killer. No censorship. Go on there. It's very similar. Same process, but without the harassment from the left. ConnectZing.com. Go check it out, folks. You won't be sorry that you did. Imagine this, folks. Imagine that you were out with your children on some sunny day, maybe spring, and the birds are chirping. Imagine this, and you got your child with you. Maybe your child's like 3 years old, 4 years old. And all of a sudden, you turn your back, and there's some guy that starts to walk up to your child. Let's say your child's 4 years old. But let's say you've had, for the past 3 years, a book called The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. And you've been showing your child these different pictures that have awareness and safety built into that book, into those pictures. And you yourself have been able to go on the website, teamlittlebigs.com, and download the lesson plans that go with each picture. Now, guess what? There is a picture in there where the children are at the playground, and there's a stranger in the background. There's some broken glass on the ground. There's heat coming off of the slide. All these things are issues that children would have to deal with at a playground. Perhaps you're swinging too high. It's dangerous. All of these lessons are built into the pictures, and you get the lesson plans at teamlittlebigs.com. This book is available now for pre-order. It's coming out in April. But I promise you, if you start now teaching your children between the ages, I'd say between 2 and 7, 2 and 8, and you start going through this book on a daily basis, and there's going to be more to come, more specific things. If you're going on a trip or so on and so forth, you'll be able to get a book specifically for that and kind of prepare them for it. Remember, prepare. You're going to do it before. The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's not just a book of pictures. It's a book of pictures with lessons in it that you can teach your children before they ever get into these circumstances. The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Go check it out, and let's get back to the show. Alrighty. I am sure glad I got this Rodecaster Pro, which is a complete soundboard. If you're doing a podcast, I highly recommend it because it really takes all the work. I mean, it's a game changer for me. I wish I would have had this thing years ago. It would have changed my video cast, which, I'm toying with that idea of bringing it back. I'm also thinking about putting up a store on my website, which is being redone right now. If you can't find it, that's why. And I'm having it redone. I'm thinking about putting a store in there where you can order the books directly from me, and T-shirts and hats and things like that. But I'm considering putting my GoFundMe page back up so that I can, in the interim, while I'm waiting for this podcast to grow, do what I did a couple of years ago with the support from some amazing people that followed me and put their faith in me. And I was able to get enough money through GoFundMe to go out and take Rico with me. This was before Rico passed away, my dog, and go all around the country and put people on the show. They literally were on the show with me. Now it's much easier because of the equipment that I have and because I've met all those people. So now it's just a matter of just getting Reed back in touch with them and boom, going out there. I'm thinking about that. There is a GoFundMe page, the Experts show. You can see that if you go to GoFundMe, that's where it's at. I'm considering, I never took it down. It's there. But I'm considering about starting to pump that up again so we can get back out. Maybe as soon as this coronavirus goes away, maybe even before that, because quite frankly, I think I'd rather be out on the road doing my own thing than sitting at home waiting to get that virus. So we'll see. We'll see. If you are interested, it's GoFundMe. You can go to GoFundMe and look up the Experts Roadshow, and it's on there. I want to just say real quick before I close about this whole Q movement. Now, I saved it to the last because despite what the Q people think, most people don't know what Q is or QAnon or the Q Army. And this is what I have to say to you all, okay? You can come at me on Twitter. You can do all these things. You think that I think differently than you do. I believe that the majority of people that follow Q are patriots. But here's the problem. Many, many, many of the people I've talked to were never veterans. And what I'm starting to find is that many of the people that come after me on Twitter, when I reference Q at all, they say they're veterans. One guy came on, was like saying, you know, Bud's class, that's SEAL training, Bud's class 234 or whatever it was. I don't even know if he was in that Bud's class, but apparently, according to him, he was there and quit, which doesn't mean he knows squat about being a SEAL. So there's a lot of fishy people that are very drawn into this thing. And it reminds me, and I'm saying this with all due respect for people who care about this country, because I do believe there are people who care about the country who follow this stuff. You have to be very careful, right? I worked in 4 federal agencies. If there was a master plan about how they were going to go after all these dangerous people in government, that plan would be known. There's so many liberals in the government. It would be out in a matter of no time. And if you think you know who everybody is that's liberal in the government, you're wrong. There's people that don't let their ideologies out, and they're dangerous. And quite frankly, normally they get put in a lot of these positions. And if there was somebody in government that was giving out this information, it would leak out. They would get it. They would know if there was a master plan, right? I'm not saying Trump doesn't have a plan for things. I trust Trump. I do not trust Barr. I don't trust the DOJ. I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the executives in the DOD or in ICE or in the CIA or any of these agencies. I don't trust them because these people at the very top are not to be trusted. They don't make rank through achievement. They are pulled up by people who want people that are like-minded, not people who are great at what they do. That's not how you're chosen to be an executive in D.C. And all these people, you might as well consider them to be D.C. swamp because that's where they work. Now, that to the side. A lot of people, I would have to say the majority of people that come after me on Twitter when I say something about Q, they assume because I said something that I'm not a patriot. Now, a lot of these people, and I know I'm not known to everybody, but a lot of these people believe that they are the greatest patriots in the world, and they do not research who I am, which makes no sense at all because what they end up criticizing me for is they say, obviously, you haven't done your research on Q. Well, I have, but they haven't researched me. They end up calling me a leftist or mainstream media hack. And I mean, if you look at any of my posts throughout the years, or if you look at 3 years worth of shows every night on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, where I was criticizing mainstream media, calling them out for what they do. I worked at CNN behind the scenes. I know what went on there. I was an analyst there. I was on Fox News every week for 3 years. I know what goes on there. And I've railed against it. I've hosted Hannity's radio show and Gorka's show and David Webb and Andrew Wilkow. I'm a serious fill-in host. I know exactly what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm here to tell you that anybody that calls me out and tries to say that I'm not a patriot after the resume that I have of service in the most dangerous jobs that you can have in this country and for this country, they're idiots if they call me out for that. They haven't done their research. The reason I'm so hard on Q people is because you follow a blind source. You don't know who's putting out this information. All you know is that you're fed enough so that you keep researching. And no one in their right mind, it wasn't even like this when Q started. There was no number game. There was no gaming where you had to figure out what the information is. Any source that is patriotic, one, is not going to be anonymous. And two, that's why do you think all the stuff that comes out in the media from a government source is always anonymous? Because it's usually bullcrap against the president. Like when it's a op-ed in the New York Times or something, they say from anonymous. The reason they do that is because they're full of crap. And the more anonymous you are, the harder it is to prove it. So they stay anonymous and they feed information out from you, and they've turned it into a game. And people are drawn into this because they get to figure it out. And you seriously think that the president or somebody in the DOJ, if they wanted to rally the people, that they would play a game with you, a numbers game, to have you go research facts based on numerology? I can't even believe that I'm having to have this conversation. When you look at it from the outside, it's ridiculous. And listen, if all turns out where this Q thing is real, I would say the same thing. That you wasted years and years of patriots' lives who care about this country, instead of getting them together, formulating a plan, doing what they did in Virginia, where they went and stood in front of the Capitol and made a real message. Instead of doing that, they keep people on their couches debating and looking up numbers. Meanwhile, Attorney General Barr is doing nothing. The DOJ doesn't do anything. The FBI has investigated anybody. Nobody's in jail. And there's some kind of master plan with sealed indictments of this number or that number, and Guantanamo is coming. No, it's not happening. There's sealed indictments by the tens of thousands every year. Why? Because cases sometimes call for a sealed indictment. The judge doesn't want that information out until the court case is over with. Or maybe it's a protection issue. I could point out any number of things about the government when I worked there that you don't have knowledge of, and I could make it sound like a mystery if I stayed anonymous. Trust me. The point of all my tirades on Twitter is that if you're going to be a patriot, there is a plan. And it was set out over 240 years ago by the founding fathers. And the base of that plan is the Constitution. And the Constitution says that you're in charge, but you don't realize that, and you don't stand together. And so what happens? Nefarious, psychopathic, narcissistic people work their way to the top because the people are asleep, and because they're more engaged in some kind of numerology game by a source that they don't know, and information that can add up in many different ways because you're the one making it up as you go along. And you're listening to certain people online that do videos and put these pieces together, because guess what? They're probably the ones creating the pieces, and they make money off of you because you send your money in. They don't give you a voice. You send your money to them, and they pocket that money because it doesn't really cost anything to make a video and put it up on Facebook or YouTube. I don't know if you realize that. It doesn't cost these people any money. Those people who spout that Q stuff all the time could be doing this in their off time, but it's a game. It's a game to get themselves paid. And that's all. If there really was at one point somebody in the government giving out information, well, they should be investigated, and they should be charged with leaking information, using their official position to gain. That's against the law. And for you, the American patriots out there, to be misguided into a point where you will call other patriots who don't believe in that. See, they divided you and you don't even realize it. You can put something on Twitter saying that this nonsense about Q is ridiculous. The Constitution is the thing we need to stand by. And they'll come and they'll hammer you because you're zealots. Now, I stand by everything I say. And like I said before, this could turn out to be something absolutely real. It's not. But even if it was, I would say the same thing, because it's a waste of time. There's only one plan that matters, and there's only one foundation for that plan, and it's the Constitution. And the plan is that you, the people, stop being asleep and start standing together. That's the plan. None of this stuff would be happening in Washington, D.C. if you followed that plan. I'm sure I'll have more to say about that in the future. But as for now, the plan for this show is to be put out here in just a few minutes, so you'll have it tonight, and then you'll have it tomorrow when you wake up. Remember, tell everybody about this show. Subscribe to it. Share it. If you have something you want me to talk about, email me, text me. Not text me. You don't know my number. Email me. or direct message me on one of the social media platforms that you belong to. I read that stuff. And remember, it's me responding, not somebody else. If you want to insult me, I'll come at you. I'll come right back at you. Because I guarantee you, you won't say typically what you're saying to me in person. I will. I'll say it right to your face. I've done it before. But for now, that's it. Have a blessed night. God bless you. Thank you for all the support. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. That is The Experts. And this is the truth. Peace. And we are out of here. That's all, folks.